So your last date of your submission of assignment has been extended to March 15, and did you get a mail from Professor Kishore Goswami yesterday?
Yes, sir.
Regarding the structure of the assignment? Hmm?
No, sir. Like we got the mail
No,
about
sir.
the extension of deadline only.
And he said I will mail
Oh,
the structure.
okay. Okay. No, that I mailed you people that your last date yesterday morning I mailed you, and I mailed you also. Okay, I'll mail you in the evening. Then I requested Kishore Goswami sir to mail the structure. Yeah, so anyway, if he has not mailed it, I'll speak to him, and otherwise I'll mail it today. Okay. So what we are discussing in this context was what is GDP, GNP, or NNP at factor cost, and how those concepts are linked each other. Then we discuss about few examples where those economic activities, or we can say economic activities, whether they are part of our GDP or not. So these are the few examples we discussed in the last class, and then we stop. Furthermore, what we can see is we can divide our all economic activities broadly into three sectors. That is your primary sector, secondary sector, and tertiary sector. The primary sector is inclusive of agriculture, forestry, and fishing, mining, and quarrying, as you can see. And similarly, secondary sector is manufacturing, electricity, gas, and water supply, and construction. The construction sector included here has a peculiarity in the international. If you look at the CSO, Central Statistical Organization's website, like this is the table I have taken it from the CSO. Then in CSO, this construction sector is usually added in the secondary sector. The secondary sector is otherwise also known as your industrial sector, because the manufacturing sector is the major sector of that part. Similarly, primary sector is also known as your agriculture sector. As you can see, agriculture is the key sector of this. Out of these three, you can see agriculture has a very high percentage in the primary sector. The point I was trying to make is there is a difference in construction. If you look at the CSO include construction in the secondary sector, whereas if you look at RBI, the construction sector is included in the tertiary sector. Nevertheless, nowadays the construction sector is have a very higher share, but earlier it was not that much. So it was not there was not big differences. But now, because as you see, construction's contribution to our GDP has increased over the years. Therefore, when you place it where the different composition of our GDP in terms of primary, secondary, or tertiary sector, that goes for a toss. So if you look at this table bit carefully, you see the primary sector contributions, or we can say the agriculture sector contributions has been declining. And if you look at for industry sector or the secondary sector, the sector shares increased initially, but since 1980s, it remained almost constant at around say 26% to say around 28% in 24. That range, it's just 2-3% here and there. Otherwise, it's remained constant for last 30-40 years. And then you see the tertiary sector has been increasing. So if we look at also employment, the population employed in different sectors. And also we look at the contribution of different sectors in our GDP. The transitions happening is known as your structural transformation. Structural transformation. If we look at the most of the currently developed economies of the world, most of them have followed a typical pattern of structural transformation. So when we are speaking about structural transformation, this is inclusive of both GDP as well as employment. What is happening in both in our GDP as well as employment is known as our structural transformations. So if we look at say GDP, then you see in the initial stage of your development, or we can say the first stage of our development. So in the initial stage of our development in GDP, we have agriculture, let's say around 70% of our 70% of our GDP are from agriculture or the primary sector, and say around 10% of our is from services, and rest 20% are from industry. So this is the composition you will see in the initial stage of our economic development. So when in the second stage of development, the composition of GDP go for a change. Almost your 50%, in that case, your 50% of your GDP comes from your industrial sector, and say 20% of your GDP comes from say agriculture, and around say 30% of your GDP comes from your service sector. Again, in the third phase of or the final phase of your development, the GDP composition also goes for a change. Almost, let's say, your 70% of your GDP comes from your service sector, and say only say 5% of your GDP comes from your agriculture, and around let's say 25% of your GDP come from your industrial sector. And what happens is, in terms of your employment, that is out of total populations, how many of them are, or what percentage of that population engaged in different sector. So that composition of employment also follows a similar pattern. So you see in the initial stage or the first stage of your development, in agriculture almost 70% of your populations is engaged, and around 10% of your populations are engaged in your services, and same 20% of your population engaged in your industry. And in the second phase also we have similar situations where 50% of your populations are engaged in industry, and similarly in case of stage 3 or the final stage of your development, you see almost 70% of your population engaged in services. What we observe here is there is a concomitant or there is a one-to-one correspondent in between your GDP and employment composition. So when we move from this first stage of your development to your second stage of your development, in that phase, you see the agriculture share go on declining, and your industry share increases, as well as your service share increases. However, in industry share increases at a increasing speed, whereas in case of service, it just gradually start to increase. So again, when you see the transition from the second stage of development to your third stage of your development or the final stage of your development, you see here agriculture again go on declining, industries goes on declining, and service sector goes on increasing at an increasing rate. And this is a typical pattern of structural transformations we have observed for many of the developed countries of the world. But if we look at for India, what has happened is we, in terms of GDP, we have moved from our first stage of development to the third stage of development, leapfrogging the second stage of development. What I mean by this is, initially in India, the agriculture share, say if you look at around 1950s, we see the agriculture share in the if you look at this primary sector, agriculture share has declined. Service sector or the tertiary sector has increased. And if you see for the secondary or the industry sector, This industry sector in this graph, as you can see, there is initially there is a bit of rise. After that, if you see, there is almost constant since 1980s. Okay. So this is in terms of our GDP. But if we look at in terms of our employment, if you look at in terms of our sectoral employment, you see agriculture still hold the highest percentage of employment, followed by our service sector, and then the others are urban. So what you see here is, if you look, compare these two tables, the bottom table is for the employment compositions, whereas the top table is for the GDP. You see almost 50% of our populations are in agriculture. Whereas in agriculture, we have around 18.5%. This is for 2011-12. I've given this 2011-12 figures because of the availability of the employment informations. Now, if you look at the employment informations for 2017-18, it is around 48.7% of our populations engaged in agriculture, and our GDP agriculture sector contribution to GDP is around 15%. So what you see is almost 50% of your populations are enjoying the 15% of the cake. Whereas if you look at service sector, in service sector, we have around 28% populations engaged, or the workforce engaged in our service sector, and service sector contributions in 2018 is around 60%. So what you see is 28% workers are enjoying 60% of the cake, and here you have around 48.7% of your populations are enjoying only 15% of our cake. This shows the rise in inequality. This shows the rise in inequality over the time in case of India. So vast majority are engaged in agriculture sector or the primary sector, but primary sector's share in our GDP has declined to a considerable levels. Now it is around 14-15%. Whereas in case of service sector employment had remained constant, because service sector is not mostly it's not a labor intensive sector. What do you mean by this labor intensive? The proportions of, or what you can say, the if you want to produce some output, how much labor you are using. If you are using more of labor, then that is a more labor intensive. So because service sector is not very labor intensive economic activities, therefore its employment has remained almost that around 28-30% for the last 30-40 years, and its GDP contributions has increased significantly, which was around say 35-36% at the beginning of this new millennium. Now it has reached around 60%. So we see there is a significant rise in the GDP coming from service sector, but there is no rise in the employment in that sense. So that has resulted in rising inequality over the years. And this also what you can see has featured in unique structural transformation for India. If you look at say this is for United States, US, this figure, you see this is for the service sector, both for the employment as well as GDP. And you see they are moving in very closely. So you observe that both GDP and employment in the service sector are in the same directions, and they are very and similarly, if you see industry, it is also very closely. And also in case of agriculture. So, but in case of India, if you see agriculture share is like here in GDP, but sorry, in employment, and agriculture share in GDP is here. So you see the difference compared to the other picture for the US. So India has a unique type of structural transformations, and probably this has led to rise in inequality in the country. So this is all about structural transformation. The other point I would like to discuss regarding this is what is known as your real GDP and nominal GDP. So what is this real GDP and nominal GDP? So for real GDP, I'll write GDP subscript R, and for nominal GDP, I'll write GDP subscript N. Okay. As we see, income is measured in the nominal as well as in real terms. The nominal GDP is obtained when outputs are valued at their corresponding current prices. So you'll get GDP nominal if your output prices, say if your output is say QI for the ith product in the current year, and I am valuing it for the prices of the ith good in the current period, and I am summing it for the all goods. There are n goods. Then this gives me GDP, or the nominal income, or the nominal GDP. Okay. However, when I am evaluating my outputs at a constant prices, that prices prevailing in a chosen year, then I'll get real GDP, or what you call is real income. So I is equal to 1 to n, and QI in the current time period is evaluated at a time price in a base year. So here C is for your current year, and B is for your base year or a constant year. Base year or a constant year. I is for the commodities, and we have n number of commodity. Q is for your quantities, and P is for your prices. So your PIC is price of good I in the current year. Similarly, your PIB is price of good I in the base year. And QIC is your quantity or the output of good I in the current year. Both these concepts are useful. While your nominal income is the true measure of income, a change in it over time is a poor indicator of change in the economic well-being of the earner, or maybe the populations. This is because this could change due to a mere change in price, or a change in it could be composed of change in both in the output as well as in the prices. For example, say you have quantities. So this is your 2010, and let's say this is your 2021. So in 2010, your quantity was say 10, and your price was say 2. So your GDP, or the nominal income, you can say was 20. Now in 2021, your quantity remained same as 10, but prices has increased to, let's say, 4. Then you see your GDP become 40. In this case, your GDP has doubled, but this doubling of your GDP is because of your increase in prices, not because of your output is increasing. For instance, if you think of this GDP is production of wheat, say 10 kg of wheat is produced, and the wheat price was 2, and then GDP was 20, because you are producing, let's say, a single commodity wheat. So because the same quantity, if we are looking at the well-being of the individuals, how much wheat they actually consume. If population remain constant, then you can see they will be consuming the exact same amount of your wheat in both the years. However, if you look at the GDP you will see and measure their well-being, then you will see you may tell that the well-being of those individual has doubled because GDP has doubled. However, such an interpretation is incorrect. Such an interpretation is incorrect because if, those people are eating only the same amount of wheats. Because we are looking at here the nominal GDP, and here the rise in GDP is due to the mere change in prices. As in this case, for the individuals, income doubles and the prices of all the goods and services. The other example you can think of, say, for an individual, income doubles. At the same time, the prices of all the goods and services that the individual buys with all his income also double. There is no change in his purchasing power or economic well-being. Let me give you an example to illustrate it. Let's say you have 100 rupees and you can purchase 2 pens, and how many pens you purchase determines your well-being. Then in that sense, you have 100 rupees and say you get 2 pens. So the price of the pens are 50 rupees also. Now your income increases, or let's say your scholarship doubles to 200 rupees. At the same time, the prices of the pens has also doubled from 50 rupees to it become 100 rupees. Then with the 200 of your incomes, you will only able to purchase the same 2 pens. You will not able to purchase more. Then in that case, in that sense, your well-being has not increased because you are not, even your scholarship has doubled from 100 to 200. So this is what we call is your nominal income. So therefore, judging the change in the economic well-being, we need to remove this price effect from the changed income. So the real income concept achieve this by valuing all the goods and services at their corresponding prices in a chosen base year. For India, the chosen base year currently we have is 2011 and 12, the latest base year we have. Prior to this, we have the base year was 2004-05, and prior to that we have the base year was 1990 and 1990-2000. Before that we have what you see in the base year was 93-94 and so forth. So what this real income does is, you can think of this real income is like the actual physical volume of the production, like here in the quantities remain 10 and 10. So you will say there is no change in the economic well-being of the individual. So when you are keeping your prices fixed at the chosen base year, and you are valuing your output on that chosen base year prices, then we get this real GDP. And the ratio of your GDP nominal to your GDP real is known as your GDP deflator. GDP deflator. And this GDP deflator usually indicates the overall inflations or the rise in the general price level in case of for a country. For instance, in case of India, if you think the nominal GDP in 2011 and 12 was around 83 million, and the real GDP, that is in 52 million or 52 billion, then the GDP deflator will be around, say, 1.5. So what it implies is overall there is a rise in prices, general price level, or there is inflation. We can separate the two effects, change in the nominal GDP, into what we can say one is your inflation rate or the general price level increase, and the other one is your growth rate in your real income. So we can decompose our nominal GDP growth as two parts. One is your inflation part, that is rise in your or growth rate in your growth in your price level, and the other one is growth in your real income. So if you see our income is nothing but Y is equal to quantity times your prices. And if you differentiate, taking a total differentiation of this, you see this is dy is equal to your u plus. So this and if you divide both sides by y, and take then what you get is dy by y, so that is change in your y upon y. It gives you nothing but the growth rate. Let's write growth rate as your y hat. Then here taking y is equal to qp, so I can write it say in place of y. If I write y is equal to qp, then this q cancel out, and I left with what you call as dp by p, that is change in price by p, that is nothing but growth rate of your prices. Let's say write p hat as the growth rate of your prices. Similarly here, if I replace it y by qp, pp cancel out, so I have dq by q, that is change in physical quantity by your the physical quantity, that is nothing but your real income growth or the real output growth. So let's write it q hat. So this y hat, which is nothing but your growth rate in your nominal income, is equal to the growth rate of your prices, that is your inflation, then plus your growth rate of your real income. However, we should know, like if you're keeping, when you are measuring your real income, you are keeping if price is constant at a chosen base year. So when we are computation of your real income creates a problem due to the emergence of your new products and change in the quality of products over time. For example, say if your chosen base year was in 1960, when you do not have these smart mobiles, then you're not able to add them into your GDP because you don't have prices available in your chosen base year. Again, over the years, you observe your electronics items quality has probably improved. At the same time, the prices has declined. At the same time, the prices has declined. So when you are measuring your real GDP, this creates a problem because of the non-availability. Sorry. For some products prices as well as the change in the quality of products over time, as those products have not priced during the base year because at that time they did they didn't exist. Therefore, what in practice we do is we approximations are made to take care of these difficulty. Also, in real income calculations, the choice of base year is significant. Otherwise, it may provide some distortions to the income informations in this context, we have this Hindu growth rate post independence. If you change the base year, the Hindu rate of growth probably may not applicable. Furthermore, in 2017, when the new base year 2011 was 11-12 was introduced, there was also hue and cry because of the chosen base year, which has resulted in what you can say the growth rate of the 2004-5, particularly in the UPA periods of your growth, which has been declined because of chosen base year of 2011 and 12. So we are not going to discuss that debate. Those who are interested, you can look into this, how this chosen base year of 2011-12 has resulted in the reduced growth rate of GDP in the period when UPA, United Front Alliance government was at the center. So therefore, when we are choosing a base year, that should be a normal year, neither too good or not too bad, and also not a year of significant events. For instance, we cannot choose a year, we cannot choose 2020-21 as one of our base year because we have coronavirus that disturbs the whole world. There are few limitations of our measurement of our GDP. because it ignores the benefits due to when we are measuring GDP, it ignores the non-market and unofficial markets. Also, measure of the output of the service may be wrong because we do not have a counterfactual, and then we do not take into account the improved quality of the product which has been happened over the time period. Furthermore, it ignores the benefits due to leisure. For instance, if you work more, you may produce more, but you don't have any leisure. So leisure as a product, we do not take into consideration. So we ignore the benefits due to leisure and loss due to human costs of employment in terms of physical and mental strain associated with the jobs. As we know that leisure is valuable to everyone and thus considered as a normal good in economics, while strain is unwanted. Similarly, we do not look into the composition of our output. We equate goods, let's say, good and bad together. For instance, we treat educations as well as weapons as the same thing in the same line. So we do not say distinguish this the goods and bads. Similarly, we do not distinguish what the merit goods and non-merit goods. Further, we ignores the income distributions because if you have a equally income distributions, the social welfare may be the maximum. Social welfare perhaps the maximum when income is distributed equally among all individuals of the country. And then also we do not look into underground economy and the environmental adverse consequences due to GDP are not part of our GDP, but environment, as we discussed earlier, is our biosphere is key to our key to our human our survival as well as our welfare. Therefore, because of these limitations, we have there are other two concepts come up, what we call is human development and poverty, that we'll look into as we'll go along later. So we'll stop here. If you have any queries, then let me know.
You said that you will be sending the layout for the term paper by yesterday night.
I requested actually